it's time for some more rapid reviews. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris and today's video is the Gunmetal Gods and Never Die book reviews. Much like the last time, we are going to jump into these and do some pretty quick fire reviews to make sure that we get them all done, starting off with Gunmetal Gods. This was Zamil Akhtar's debut, I believe, in a series of the same name. There is book number 2 and also a novella now out in this series. Now, this one was a little bit weird for me. I quite liked some of the elements inside of this story, but it didn't work for me overall. The reader is following two POVs. We have Keva and Micah, and we'll go into those in detail. We're following these men through the same timeline at opposite ends of the spectrum. They don't like each other, and we get to see both sides of the story. Starting with Keva, he was once a living legend. He bested a Magus in his youth. The Magus are the magic wielders of this story, and their power is situated in a mask over their face, giving them eternal youth. If you demask a Magus, and the only way to kill them is to demask them or behead them, I can't quite remember, but something to do with taking off a head and a mask, then you have bested that, and Keva is the only person who has been able to best one to everyone's knowledge. But it's been about 20 years since that happened, and now he prefers a life of luxury. He's let himself go, he's overweight, he basically just wants to smoke cherry smoke, eat good food, and live the rest of his days not being bothered by anything else. When he returns home to his father and adopted daughter in this story, he's asked to take on yet another Magus, one even more powerful than the first one that he bested 20 years prior. Not only will he need to be able to face this Magus, but to get to it, he will also have to take on Micah the Metal and his faith-fueled gun-wielding paladins. The second POV we have is Micah, or Micah the Metal, and we start basically with his baptism, which is being watched by thousands of people. Micah is feared for a reason. He will stop at nothing to fight for his archangel, and he is fueled by faith and just an unwavering belief in that faith and what he is doing. He and his followers will take down anything and anyone that do not believe and conform to his gods. They took his daughter, and in return, the gun-wielding paladins will take everything. Now, I've talked to people who both loved this book and people who didn't love this book so much or just didn't vibe with the story. I sit somewhere in the middle of these two people, to be completely honest. We do get to see two opposing sides. We get to see their internal politics and their internal views, their questioning of faith and culture, which was fascinating, but it did feel a little bit disjointed to me. We have Keva and Micah. They're working on opposite sides. They deem the other person the enemy. It was interesting to have this hatred built up between two POVs over the course of an entire story to basically come to a crescendo of a conclusion between the two. So while it didn't work for me overall, it did have a few elements that kept me listening to the book. So I did really enjoy the way the story was told with the two POVs at the same timeline, building it up and up and up and up and up until they eventually would meet in the middle. Another thing I enjoyed here was the feel of the book. We have a Middle Eastern vibe, and it's very different culturally to other things that I have read, which I really appreciated. It made for such a fascinating world, and that element did really work for me. There were also some very deep and excellent conversations around faith and grief. Neither of our POVs were afraid to express their sorrow or wavered in their belief of life and death, and it is something that we do see out in the real world. This unwavering faith and inability to adapt to anything that is not within someone's belief system. And what can that absolute faith make us do? And are we as humans capable of horrendous acts, all in the name of God? These were concepts which were explored quite deeply within this book, and an element that I really enjoyed. The last thing I'll mention here that did work for me is how intricate the internal politics were on both sides of the story. We as the reader got a first-hand look at just how delicate it can be to maintain balance and motivation within a large group of people fighting for a common belief. Now, in terms of the criticisms, the story to me was a little bit slow and a little bit dull. For someone who quite likes a slow story, it felt like there was a lot of hurry up and wait moments. We were waiting for something to happen and just sitting there with the characters around a campfire while we were doing nothing. And to me, it made parts of the book feel rather sluggish. I also did not vibe with one of our main characters at all, Micah. I just couldn't stand him. From the beginning of the book until the end of the book, I felt very neutral and non-caring about Micah at all. I quite liked Keva, and that is why I continued to listen to the book, was because I was very interested in the relationships that Keva was developing and how his side of the story would turn out. But Micah, honestly, you could take him out of the book and I would have had a better time. There is also one very questionable scene in this book which I felt like did not have to happen at all, and the story would have been fine for not having had this in there, or it could have been done in a much different way with not having had that act happen. But it almost had me DNFing, so just check trigger warnings for this book going in. So while the story itself didn't work for me, there were certainly elements that I did appreciate. I think personally my time in this world is done. I will not be continuing on with the series, but I am very interested in the progression fantasy series, starting with Lightblade, that this author has put out this year. So I'll probably pick up something from this author, just not in this series. That is Gunmetal Gods. Let's move on to Never Die by Rob J. Hayes. Never Die is the first installment of the Mortal Techniques series by Rob J. Hayes. Each book in this series can be read as a standalone, as its own story, but it is part of a bigger box set. Never Die is a fast-paced, Asian-inspired fantasy full of epic battles, oaths, and ancient demon gods on the hunt. As the reader, we follow 8-year-old Ian as he picks up heroes and brings them back to life with a mysterious power gifted to him by a Shimigami. I'm going to pronounce that wrong this entire part of the review, so I apologize. He's been given a gift which must be used in order to kill the Emperor of 10 Kings, an impossible task for our band of heroes, let alone an 8-year-old child. The first of our heroes is Itami Chen, otherwise known as the Whispering Blade. She is a war hero who only ever draws one of her 2 swords when in battle. Once brought back to life, Itami helps Ian to find other heroes in order to carry out this impossible task for a chance of renewed life. Real life, not like being mostly alive. Along the way, we as the reader meet a number of different heroes and a number of different characters, some with questionable pasts and some with heroic pasts. We have the Emerald Wind, a notorious bandit-turned-hero, Bing Wei Ma, the master of Sun Valley, and who could forget Iron Gut Chen, who was most upset that being mostly alive made food taste like dirt. Once collected, the heroes are on their way. They make their way to the temple to carry out an impossible task of killing the most powerful man alive, all while on the run from the yokai, Shimigami demons, hell-bent on stopping them. Never Die was a super action-packed book. It was a fast-paced adventure full of intense battle scenes and ancient creatures from the depths of hell. While the plot was fairly linear, we never wavered from the we're collecting heroes to do the task. The character work here was stellar and the standout for me. We have a number of different heroes. Each of these heroes have different upbringings, different belief systems, and they all had to learn to work together in order to complete their goal. Hayes allowed each one of our characters to shine as we traveled through the locations where they resided, picking them up to continue on with our task. The battle scenes were also really fun in this book. Each time the stakes were high enough to be believed, there were moments where you didn't know what the outcome was going to be because it was written so well. And we got to remember that our undead heroes are in fact not immortal the second time around. And because of this, they had to be very clever with the skills that they were using in the battles. I thought that the battle scenes here were really intense and really well thought out. It wasn't just a bang 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 and we're done with it. It was intense and it made my heart rate very fast at a couple of points, which is great. That's exactly what you want from a high intensity battle scene, right? The more I think about this book, the more there is to take in. It kind of feels like one of those RPG games where the story is fairly linear, but you've got a whole bunch of side quests that you can go off and see. This is what that feels like. We're following one story, but we do get to see little pockets of the world and lives, and we get to focus on different things while still being led in one direction, and I thought that was really cool. I've not read a book that does that like this, and it was a good time for me. I also like those kind of games, so I guess. I will admit this was not my favourite Rob J. Hayes book. I think he does character work exceptionally well, and I did like the War Eternal series more, That being said, this was a different take on his writing style for me, which I was interested to experience, and I can't wait to continue on with this series. Those were two quick reviews, one for Gunmetal Gods by Zamil Akhtar and the second for Never Die by Rob J. Hayes. Have you enjoyed either of these books? What did you think? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like the content, give it one of these. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will, and I will catch you in the next video. Ciao.